This happens a lot these days, but while we've been talking about January 6th and the congressional and DOJ investigations into that, news has broken on one of the other deadly serious investigations into ex-President Donald Trump. The New York Times just reported that the Justice Department has asked an appeals court to end the special master review of the thousands of documents seized by the FBI in its August search at Mar-a-Lago. DOJ is arguing that Judge Eileen Cannon was wrong to intervene in its investigation into Donald Trump's hoarding of sensitive government records, including national defense information. I want to get you, since we have you, and there's so much to talk about on this front, I do want to get to Mar-a-Lago, but let me start with the Capitol, since you worked on the two impeachments. There's no justification for not impeaching Donald Trump on the part of Republicans in either one. But what they hid behind in the first was a perceived lack of firsthand witnesses. All of the evidence put into the record by the January 6th Select Committee comes from firsthand witnesses, people who sat in the room with Donald Trump, people who were screamed at by Donald Trump, people who wrote orders to withdraw the military from Somalia and Afghanistan at the direction of Donald Trump. What is the impact of that in terms of sort of a ripple that everyone that the public heard from was someone that Donald Trump relied on day in and day out?
You hit the nail on the head, Nicole, and I'll go even further than that. In the January 6th impeachment, we presented the evidence of Donald Trump's unique role, not only on January 6th, but leading up to it with all his false claims that the election was stolen. And there were so many of the Republican senators said, we proved our case for impeachment, high crimes and misdemeanors, but they relied on the technicality that you can't, according to them, impeach a former president. But they agreed we proved the case. And we did that without the power of subpoenaing the firsthand witnesses because we didn't have a Department of Justice under Trump who would enforce those subpoenas.
Right.
Now, in addition to all the evidence we presented that the Republicans found persuasive, including Mitch McConnell, they have the actual witnesses, his closest aides, the Republicans who worked for him, who present the damning case that it's as bad as it could possibly be. He knew everything, every step of the way that he was accused of, and ignored it for his own personal benefit. So there cannot be a stronger case of direct evidence showing how he put his own personal interests over the safety of his vice president, Congress, and over the country and democracy. So I think that's a great question. The Republicans want to avoid talking about it. They don't have to vote this time. It's not an impeachment. But I really think that with democracy on the ballot, there is a real call. Can people wake up and realize that both parties should be called upon to come together and protect our free and fair elections and recognize that what went on here, whatever your politics, was as bad as this country has ever seen in terms of assault directed by the leader of our country against another branch of government in order to use his power to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. That's it. And when you strip away everything else, it's hard to see how right-thinking people could disagree about how bad that was.
I want to play more of the tapes for you that Daily Whitehouse obtained. This is some footage filmed by Speaker Pelosi's daughter, an accomplished filmmaker, Alexandra Pelosi. Let me play this. This is number 5. Let's watch this. Speaker Pelosi.
The SecDev was saying we've got to make plans and this takes organization. We said, no, why don't you just put people in vehicles logistically to get there? There is leadership of the National Guard at the Capitol with the Capitol Police leadership, but they have not been given authority to be activated. So that, in other words, that leadership can be taking place simultaneous to people coming in trucks to the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, I spoke to Vice President Pence, and he was going to see, because Mitch wants to do it in the Capitol, but we're being told it could take days to clean it up and make sure there are no hidden, bombs.
What do you think when you watch this footage?
Well, I have two reactions. One, personally, I saw Speaker Pelosi's leadership and all how she did during both impeachments, but particularly about January 6th. I also, when I was there for the impeachment, I was working with her staff, the same people who were hiding under their desk as the mob, the insurrectionists, were trying to break down her door and would get to them. And they all were so brave in coming together and doing this. So I see that personally, and it really has an impact on me. Secondly, though, I see it again as a trial lawyer. There's been such an attempt to sanitize what happened on January 6th. Today, Donald Trump called them brave, that they were, seeking to defend the nation.
He did a vigil for them a couple weeks ago.
Just like he said his text message, the night of. And hopefully the American people can get a sense of how real this was, that these are their elected officials of both parties, our branches of government who were at risk, including the vice president, and they felt it. And I think when you look at her leadership talking to the attorney general, saying, tell the president to call this off, when she's saying to Mike Pence in other clips, saying, be safe, don't let anyone know where you are, you feel that this is one of the greatest attacks on our nation, and we have to respond appropriately. So I look at that, and I'm hopeful that it will wake up people to say how real this was, and we can't let history forget it, and make sure that we make decisions so it can never happen again at the Capitol or at the Michigan Capitol or Pennsylvania or any other state where people may try to do the same thing.
When you look at the footage, it's clear that Republicans were in the room. Mitch McConnell's in the room. Kevin McCarthy's in the room. Steve Scalise's in the room. John Thune is in the room. He's the one swaying without his coat on. Do you feel angry that they were all in the room? No one shouts out and corrects anything Nancy Pelosi says, but they did not all vote with the case that you made for conviction.
I'll tell you two things. First, I know during that day there's a lot of evidence that they did speak out. They did try to get the president to act. Many of them did, and he ignored it. I sat for 99% of the impeachment hearing. I was looking right at Mitch McConnell. I saw so many of the senators. It was clear how affected they were. They knew the truth. They knew that Donald Trump was responsible for this attack on our democracy and the Capitol, and they wanted to vote with us.
Why didn't they?
You could feel it. You know why? They didn't, because they didn't have the courage. They didn't have the courage of their convictions. They were cowards. I do believe that for many of them, if they thought they had 17 Republican votes, they would have done it, because then they would have been in the leadership, but they were afraid of power. And I
they would have been rid of him. I mean, he'd be gone.
100%. And I have to tell you, when I saw Mitch McConnell's remarks afterwards, because we were back in the room we had off the Senate with all the managers and the folks who worked on it, the lawyers, and we saw his remarks. On the one hand, yes, he said what I saw in his eyes, what I knew. He said it all. But to show the cowardness and to actually violate his oath by not voting to impeach on a technicality, and one that he wasn't allowed to consider because it had already been voted that that was not proper, for him to have done that, I think on the one hand, gave him protection, so maybe history would say he was on the right side, but without protecting our nation. So all those people who were in there, who you could see how they were affected, and they knew and they didn't vote, I would say that that was true political cowardice. And we've heard about profiles of courage. It was profiles of cowardice. But it's not too late. Just like so many people in the Trump administration, from Attorney General Barr, who helped to promote some of the false claims about mail-in ballots, but then stood up. And good for him for doing it, even if it was at the very end. It doesn't vindicate his prior sins. But you know what? Good for him for doing it. So these Republican leaders who didn't do the right thing on impeachment, who knew what the right thing was, can take action now to take steps to make sure that they're publicly out there in condemning the actions of Donald Trump and saying, we support the Department of Justice doing an independent review and bringing criminal charges if that's where the facts and the law lead them.
It's great to get to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here today, of all days. Thank you very much. Don't be a stranger to us.